From almost the first moment that I entered the big room clutching my bottle, my attention was riveted upon a girl who was there. I say a girl, but in fact she was considerably older than I was, 30 at least, I should suppose. She was very blonde and slender, almost ethereal. She had the greenest eyes I'd ever seen, or have ever seen since, and the biggest too. She wore white boots which went right up under her dress. If this girl worked in my bank, I'd certainly not seen her there. We were never introduced or anything like that, but I simply couldn't bother about anyone else who was there, male or female. I simply gravitated towards and around her. In the end she said, "Hello. You look unhappy." I nodded. That was partly because I was shy and speechless. "Come and sit by me," she said, "and have a drink." Well, the drink was the usual dreadful stuff that you get at parties where everyone's mucking in, but 3 or 4 glasses, each of something different, gave me more confidence, and in the end I was conversing with the girl quite intelligently. We had all kinds of things in common, like books and films and concerts, which I used to go in for at that time as much as I could, and in no time at all I was in 7th heaven. It was absolutely the first time in my life that I had entered that region, and as it happens, it was more or less the last time also. The rest of them were making more and more noise until it was exactly like the bank, or like the sort of tavern my father used to look for. In the end, my girl said, "Let's explore." We went upstairs and entered what I suppose was the parents' bedroom. We sat together on the bed. "I say," I said, "who are you?" "I'm Laura," she said. She did tell me her other name, but I'm keeping that to myself. She even told me her address and telephone number, and of course I should have written them down, but I suppose them to be burned on my brain forever, as one does at that age. "I'm Andrew," I said, and she smiled at me mysteriously. So I put my arm around her shoulders and should have liked to turn out the light, but I knew the door was unlocked and did not dare to go so far as to lock it. She was wearing a thin greeny dress with a pattern on it like waves. I'd never seen a dress like it, but, why, it's impossible to describe. "Andrew," she said, looking at me with her enormous eyes, "I do love you." Oh, let me tell you, it was the supreme moment of my entire life, though I didn't realize that at the time. But then she cried, "Andrew, I must go and telephone. I'd quite forgotten. You made me forget." "Oh, you will come back," I gasped out. Of course it was dangerous for her to leave the room at all. That was obvious enough. Even so, her reply astonished me. "I shall always come back," was what she said. She pulled up her boots and flitted out. Laura didn't come back. In the end, it seemed quite certain that she must have heard something on the telephone which had made her leave at once. I did not care to ask anyone. I was downcast enough on the way home, and it became worse when I realized that I'd forgotten both Laura's exact address and her telephone number. However, I knew her name right enough, and I remembered the name of the road she'd given me. Immediately I reached my digs, I looked Laura up in the communal telephone directory and found that the page was missing. It was not that it had been torn out, though the other chaps often did that. I examined the binding, and it seemed that that particular page had never been there. I slept not one wink that night between rapture and regret. But in the end, I left the banking floor, and I was given a more confidential job of toting records from place to place. It was inevitable that I saw more of the world, though I didn't always like what I saw. On several occasions I even thought of marrying, and the different girls seemed quite keen to have me, but each time I drew back at the last moment. Most men value their freedom, of course, but it was really Laura that was the trouble with me. She'd transfixed me. I could never get her out of my thoughts, though you may think this odd because I believe it was as much as 8 or 10 years before I saw or heard of her again. I was in Paris and strolling through the Parc Monceau on business, when all among the prams and nursemaids I saw her on a seat. My heart turned over. I was all but sick with the shock. "Hello," she said. "You look unhappy." "I am," I said. "It's your fault. You must know that." She smiled in that way which so confused me. "In which case, we'll go and have a drink and make it up." "Oh, you must be cold." I couldn't help saying it because she was wearing very much the same dress and the same sort of boots. And it was a blustery day in Paris with rain every now and then and worse undoubtedly to come. "I've been waiting too," she said reproachfully. She never added much to that. We wandered off across the park to a funny little place in a side street. On the way, though really it wasn't far, we passed a ghastly street accident, or perhaps it was something worse. I tried not to look at it, and as she said nothing, of course I didn't. We began mixing our drinks again in the same unwise way, and talking about all those things we had in common, though naturally we both went to fewer films and concerts and read fewer books than before. Oh, but that applies to almost everyone. I realized with a little shiver she might well be 40 by now, or at least 38. I can only say that she did not look it. She looked devastating, in a slightly peculiar way. In the end, I began eating as well as drinking, though she would only nibble. While I was in the middle of one of those hashed-up mock steaks, the patron came up in his red apron and whispered into Laura's ear. She rose instantly. "Excusez-moi," she said absent-mindedly, and as if I'd been a Frenchman. Well, she pulled herself together and added, "Back in a moment," smiling a smile. Then before I could get out a word, she walked quickly out of the cafe. Oh, yes, this time I tore right after her, but the patron clutched at me and held me back by brute force. I suppose he was frightened for his bill, but alternatively it might have been that he knew something I didn't. I mooched miserably about in the chilly drizzle for, I dare say, an hour and a half, trying to keep the cafe entrance under observation. But I knew in my bones that Laura would not return. Not there, anyway. Not then. Within only a couple of years, I got down at last to proposing marriage, and Cecilia Susan accepted me at once. I was perfectly determined to work at the marriage, and obviously it was only fair that I should, but Laura stood more hopelessly in the light than I had supposed possible. I never said a word about her to Cecilia Susan. It would have sounded so utterly unrealistic. Nor were things helped by the fact that our two children, only a year apart actually, died in an accident at the nursery school. I'm sure you heard about it, or read about it at the time. There were questions in Parliament and a big inquiry, at which we both gave evidence. In the end, Cecilia Susan left me for a more practical chap 10 years younger than I was, and 8 years younger than she was. There was a quick divorce, and I've never seen or heard of Cecilia Susan since. All this time I was working for these new people, having left the bank soon after the Parc Monceau business. It's a funny sort of job, but it pays a lot better, and it's occasionally quite exciting. There was a meeting at a big hotel near, well, I won't name it. It was in the north of Italy. That'll give you the picture. Not actually in the town either, as I say. The gathering was international, cosmopolitan, all those things. And believe me, it was pretty tense. By then I was accustomed to almost anything. But suddenly I'd had enough, and I went out for a breather. I hate a packed room. I went downstairs, and there at a table in the lounge sat Laura. She was looking out through the big window at all the snow and ice and tempest. I did not say that she was dressed in exactly the same way, not at all, but it was a version of the same garb in every detail, and she looked, well, ageless might be the best word. I stood back. I was petrified. It had been a terrible afternoon upstairs, if I'm to be honest about it, and now here in the dusk was this. In the end, Laura turned and saw me. "You do look unhappy," she said. "Come and sit by me." Well, I could hardly cut and run. In any case, we were all virtually snowed up. But needless to say, I did not want to do anything of the kind. Calm judgment was useless where Laura was concerned. I find it almost always is useless. She filled a glass from a big decanter of red wine. It was as if the glass had been set there for me and waiting. "Wine of oblivion," said Laura, smiling. At least this time we seemed not to propose mixing them, and inevitably by now we no longer read books at all, or bothered ourselves with films and concerts or anything like that. "How long are you staying?" I asked, with one part of my mind still on the drifting snow. "It doesn't matter," said Laura. There will be future occasions. I laughed, and everyone in the lounge looked up, except for the very old and the very deaf. The intervals are a bit on the long side, I said. One day there won't be a second to spare, she replied in a matter-of-fact way. I expect I stared at her like a fool. Now, if you like, she said. Well, I suppose I continued to stare. In my work I'd become ready with conventional words, but only with those. Come and see, she said, with that all-dissolving smile of hers. Do you mind carrying the wine? I followed her upstairs, back upstairs where I was concerned. In the conference room there seemed to be total silence, which was absurd and impossible. She wove in and out on the first floor of the hotel, then pushed open a dingy and ill-painted door, not up to the general standard of the place, and held it for me to pass through, with the big decanter in one hand and the two big wine glasses slipping about in the other. Beyond was a very big corridor, ill-lighted and with battered bedroom doors on either side. There were holes in the carpet and big cracks in the plaster of the ceiling, through which things might emerge when most people had gone to bed. One could not help thinking of that. Plainly it was a wing which had been virtually closed, and not only for the off-season, one would suggest. I marvelled that Laura should, as I presumed, sleep there and dwell there. Before long I was unable to reconcile so long a corridor with the outside of the building, as I'd glimpsed it for a moment on arrival. On and on and on I tramped after her, tripping over the ragged carpet, coping with my slithery burdens. She opened a door to our left. I felt immediately that it might have been any door. She stood at the portal, smiling. Really, she was much too lightly clad for the dreadful chill of that corridor, where the central heating had been so long turned off. In her wavy dress, she looked more like the sea in summer, though deep and mighty. But you wouldn't possibly understand what I mean. You would have had to be there. One day perhaps you will be. I could only just see into the room. By the few glimmering lights in the corridor, totally insufficient for modern hotel visitors, I could discern in the room only rotting woodwork and huge worms and soiled rags on the floor. Come in and have a drink with me, begged Laura. Then I can look after you properly. After a second or two of silence between us, she gently added, You might call me your guardian angel. No one should think I made a fool of myself. Not at all. I'd been very fully trained in self-control. I set down the heavy decanter on the threshold, and though one of the glasses fell from my hand as I stooped, it did not shatter. I by no means broke into a panicky rush, but at the most what my late father, who came very much into my mind at that moment, would have called a fast jog-trot, which sufficed perfectly well, though I don't know what might have happened if by mistake I had run in the wrong direction. Naturally, I've not again seen Laura as yet. I keep telling myself to stop worrying, because such things are not decided by us, but for us.
Gerald Banstead had told Phrynne that if they were to marry in June, they couldn't possibly honeymoon until October. He was all too aware of the perils of marrying a girl 24 years younger than himself, to add to them by taking a conventional honeymoon.
A village from which, it was said, persons of sufficient longevity might hope to reach Liverpool Street.
Who said that?
Bertrand Russell. I wonder if I'm of sufficient longevity to reach Holyhaven.
Gerald.
I know. I'm like a fine wine. Mature, fruity.
And deliciously full-bodied. Why do we go so slowly when it's so flat?
Because the engineer laid the line up and down the hills and valleys instead of cutting through and embanking over them.
How do you know? Gerald, you said you hadn't been to Holyhaven before.
It applies to most of the railways in East Anglia.
So that even though it's flatter, it's slower.
Time. matters less.
I'd have hated going to a place where time mattered, or that you'd been to before. You'd have nothing to remember me by.
You are funny.
Come here.
Oh.
Are you all right with those, darling?
Yes.
The platforms are long for such an out-of-way place.
Built for the big expresses, which have long since gone elsewhere. Excuse me, would you mind?
I think we'll have to help ourselves.
Look at that.
Tickets, please.
I'll get them, Gerald.
Holyhaven, eh? Seems very nice. Where's the...
Oh,
Sorry. Where's the bell?
They're starting early.
Every reason to be in good time.
Can you please tell me the way to the Bell Hotel?
Have you a room booked?
Certainly.
Tonight?
Of course.
It's them Pascos.
Yes, that's the name, Pasco.
We don't use the bell, but you'll find it in Rack Street. Straight ahead down Station Road. Then down Rack Street. You can't miss it.
what narrow streets.
Yes. They follow the lines of the medieval city. Before the river silted up, Holyhaven was one of the most important seaports in England.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Where's everybody got to? There's nobody at all.
Where's the hotel got to?
Oh, poor Gerald. Just look, let me help you
I'm
with
fine,
those cases.
fine.
Must be early closing.
Why are they ringing that bell? Is it a funeral?
Bit late for a funeral.
Well, I hope it isn't going to ring all...
Look,
What?
we've passed it.
How could we have done that?
Well, see where that big old bell's hanging. Well, that must be it.
How could we have done that?
Oh, it's nice.
Mr. and Mrs. Banstead.
Yes.
I'm Hilda Pascoe. Don, my husband, isn't very well.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's his stomach. Ever since he was a kid, Don's had trouble with the lining of his stomach. We came here for the sea air. Now, the doctor said...
I wonder
that
if we might see our rooms.
So sorry. Will you register first? Just the name and address.
You've been quiet these last few months.
It's October.
We wanted to come out of season.
Quite.
Are we alone in the house?
Oh, except for Commandant Shotcroft. Oh, you won't mind him, will you? He's a regular.
I'm sure we shan't.
Well, people say the house wouldn't be the same without Commandant Shotcroft.
What's that bell?
Practice.
Do you mean there'll be more of them later?
Oh, yes, but never mind. Let me show you to your room. Sorry, there's no porter.
Is this the quietest room you have? What about the other side of the house?
This is the other side of the house.
Is it a church?
St. Gustlax. Over there.
Darling, they'll soon stop. They're only practicing.
Well, if you don't mind.
They have ways of their own in Holyhaven.
It's a very pretty room. I adore four posters.
Thank you. We'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
What time's dinner?
7:30. You'll have time for a drink in the bar first.
We certainly have. It's only 6.
Actually, I like church bells.
All very well. But very distracting on one's honeymoon.
Not mine.
Oh.
let's explore.
Well, hadn't you better unpack?
I ought to, but I'm not going to. Not until I've seen the sea.
Oh, all right. Good heavens!
It's like warriors fighting in the sky. Do you think the sea's down there?
Well, I imagine so. The street seems to end in nothing. That'll be the sea.
Come on, let's run.
Too late now. It's getting dark.
It doesn't matter, come on.
Not really my sort of thing.
Oh, Gerald, there's no one about. Oh, isn't it beautiful?
The sea?
Well, not only.
Everything but the sea. The sea's invisible.
Oh, you can smell it.
I certainly can't hear it.
I'm not surprised. You know, it's like there's two churches.
There often can be in an old town like this.
It is another church.
Impossible. They wouldn't have practice ringing on the same night.
Well, I can hear one lot of bells with my left ear and another lot with my right.
The whole population must be ringing them.
Good for them. Let's go down on the beach and look for the sea. We'll just go straight on until we find it.
Careful, darling. It's too dark now. These stones are slippery. Here, take my hand.
I'm all right. We don't want to pull each other over.
You're right, Phrynne, about the smell.
Healthy sea smell.
Nothing healthy about that.
Gerald, where is it? I mean, what sort of a seaport is it that has no sea?
Oh, look! They put the lights on in the town. We've come too far. Look how far we've come. Phrynne? Phrynne! Phrynne!
Sorry, darling. I stood on something.
Oh, are you all right?
I think so.
Oh, the smell's worse than ever.
I think it's coming from what I stepped on. My foot went right in, and then there was the smell.
I've never known anything like it.
Oh, sorry, darling. Oh, let's go away.
Let's go back, don't you think?
I'm very disappointed, Gerald. I think that seaside attraction should include the sea.
I think the whole place is a disappointment. I really must have... What are you doing?
Well, I'm trying to get that stuff off.
We'll go somewhere else.
I don't want to go somewhere where you've been before.
I suppose all the churches practice on the same night to get it over with.
To see who can ring the loudest.
Oh, there wasn't much of it. And it could have been worse. But at least the dishes were hot.
Do you think Mrs. Pascoe had been...
Oh, yes. Since lunchtime. Yesterday lunchtime, I should imagine.
Coffee room? Well, why does that sign say coffee room when this one says coffee will only be served in the lounge?
Oh, it's the Lucius and non lucendo principle.
Oh, that explains everything. I wonder where we sit.
Well, since there's no one else around, I should say we could take our pick. No, the Lucius and non lucendo principle is the principle of calling white black.
Not at all.
Oh.
On the contrary.
I'm sorry, we didn't see you there.
The word black comes from an ancient root, which means to bleach.
Oh, I stand corrected.
Why are you here at all?
We're on holiday. We prefer it out of season. I presume that you are Commandant Shopcroft?
No need to presume. I'm going anyway.
We didn't see you at dinner.
My meals are prepared half an hour before the rest come in. I don't like eating in company. Perhaps you'll excuse me?
Well,
You'll have to ring if you want service.
too many other people ringing, I should say.
I'll do it.
Didn't see you in the bar.
Must have missed us in the crowd.
Crowd?
We'd like some coffee.
Coffee is served in the lounge.
Oh, surely just this once.
All right.
Oh, Lord, they're driving me mad.
Darling, it's not doing us any harm. I think it's rather cosy.
Don't sit like that, Phrynne.
Why ever not?
Someone might come in.
Oh, there's no one here. Except the Colonel.
Commandant.
I thought he looked like a monkey.
Let's forget the coffee. I'll get us something stronger. All you have.
Anything you like. Whatever you have.
I don't quite see why they have to keep the place like a hothouse. When I come back, we'll sit somewhere else.
Men wear too many clothes, darling.
Hello? Mrs. Pascoe. Are you all right?
What can I get you?
A cognac, please. A double and a Kummel. Allow me.
Oh, okay. But I must pour it. And a Kummel.
Oh.
That's 3 and 6.
Yeah.
Mr. Banstead, may I come and sit with you and your wife in the lounge just for a few moments?
Well,
Don't you leave me, Hilda. Don't you leave me back here.
Mr. Pascoe, good evening.
Don, you go back in,
Hilda!
and I'll come in a moment.
Excuse me.
The Kummel.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, thank you. Oh. Is my wife all right?
Shh. She's sleeping.
Why are you standing there?
She's very beautiful.
Can I get you a drink?
Nothing to drink. He was a fine man once. Don't think otherwise.
Pascoe?
Uh-huh.
Not my type.
A solid officer. DSO and bar, DFC and bar.
And now bar only.
Whatever she told you, it's a lie. They didn't come here for the sea air.
Speaking of the sea, doesn't it go out too far? We went for a walk before dinner.
He got into trouble. He was fixed. He wasn't the kind of man to know about human nature and all its rottenness.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. This can't be the best place for him.
It's the worst. For him or anyone else.
It's certainly a very noisy place.
Why did you have to come tonight of all nights?
This doesn't happen often.
Once a year?
Well, they should have told us.
They never accepted bookings when Pascoe was in charge. They've no right to.
Well, I suppose she thought she couldn't turn away business.
It's not a matter that should be left to a woman.
Well, not much alternative,
At
surely.
heart, women are creatures of darkness all the time.
My wife doesn't mind the bells. In fact, she rather likes them.
Take her away, man.
In a day or two, perhaps. I admit that we're disappointed with Hollyhaven.
Now, while there's still time, this instant.
They can hardly go on practicing all night.
Practicing.
And what else?
They're ringing to wake the dead. No, they are.
It's a figure of speech.
Not in Hollyhaven.
I beg your pardon?
No one can tell you how long they have to go on ringing. It varies from year to year, I don't know why. You should be all right up to midnight. In the end, the dead awake, first one or two, then all of them. Tonight, even the sea draws back. In a place like this, there are always several drowned each year. Most of them come not from the water, but the earth. It is not a pretty sight. You can't even imagine it. No one can.
Are you saying we should leave? I haven't got a car.
Then you'd better walk.
With her?
She's young and strong. She's 20 years younger than you, and therefore 20 years more important.
Yes, I agree. What about you?
I've lived here some time now. I know what to do. The Pascoes are drunk. There's nothing in the world to fear if you're thoroughly drunk.
But you're not drinking yourself?
Not since I came to Hollyhaven. I lost the knack.
Oh, what fun! The bells are still ringing.
I don't think there's anything more to say. You've still got time. Good evening.
What have you still got time for? Is he one of those religious types? Was he trying to convert you?
Something like that, Phrynne.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so tired. Shall we go to bed?
We have to... I think... if you're tired, it's probably a good thing.
On our honeymoon?
I mean, with these bells, God knows when they'll stop.
Oh, look. The Commandant's left his book. 15 Decisive Battles of the World. Oh, I'll take it up to him.
No. No, I'll go. Commandant, I don't understand. I need to speak to you. Commandant!
What are you doing?
I'm bringing this for the Commandant.
Oh, that. He's been reading it since he got here. When he gets to the end, he starts again.
This is his room.
Yes, just go in.
Commandant.
You mustn't take the Commandant so seriously, you know. He's Don's and I's mascot.
You should have told us about this. This annual event, before accepting our booking.
Oh, it's not always the same night. Poor Commandant Shotcroft. It pushed him out, you know. Cashiered, court-martial, muffled drums, the work.
We're leaving. Phrynne, come upstairs and pack. We're not staying.
Darling.
We'll pay for the room, of course, Mrs. Pascoe. Please, order me a car.
Oh,
What's the matter, Gerald? What's happened?
If you want to be paid, make out the bill.
I'll need your help if I'm going to pack.
don't go. Please don't go. Not now. It's too late.
Too late for what?
You said you wanted a car. You're too late.
Come on, Phrynne.
You'll be all right if you stay. Really, you will.
We'll try the front door.
They've been ringing too long. Oh, I wish they'd stop. We'll go upstairs.
Oh, God. It's pandemonium.
And we're not going out in it. We might will them to stop.
It would be better if they rang all night.
You see?
Oh, God.
Let's go somewhere else tomorrow. Shall we go to bed?
Darling, you're shivering.
Shh. Kiss me. What's the matter?
I can't.
But it's our honeymoon.
It's not that. Phrynne, you don't understand. We must just lie still. The Commandant told me.
What? Did he tell you it was a mortal sin?
Oh, don't. Oh, Phrynne. Oh. What?
Gerald?
Commandant, warn me. We should have gone.
Nowhere to go. I don't suppose they'll bother us.
We'll sit it out, no matter what happens.
Put the light on.
Yes. power's gone. We must go back to bed.
Gerald, come and help me.
Here. There.
No more, love.
No.
Hold me. They're going towards the sea.
We must think of something else. It's only till tomorrow.
They can't actually be dangerous, or it would be stopped.
Yes, of course. What the hell are they doing now? No. No.
I think they're dancing.
Commandant.
She's safe. Small thanks to you.
Is it thanks to you?
She was caught up in it, dancing with the rest.
Were some
She
of them...
was between two of them. Each had one of her hands.
What did you do?
I did what had to be done. I hope I was in time. You'll find her downstairs.
I'm grateful. Such a silly thing to say. But what else is there?
Can you walk?
Yes, I think so.
Come on, then.
Phrynne.
Darling, look at you. Here I am. Not to worry.
For God's sake, man, get something on her. She's almost naked.
Yes. Mrs. Pascoe. Mrs. Pascoe.
She's very beautiful.
I'll get a blanket.
Come on. Let's get you to bed.
I'm not tired now. I'm not tired at all.
Check the trains. We shouldn't have to wait long.
Plenty of people about today.
There's space at the Crown. Little place I know in Cambridge. I know it's somewhere I've been before, without you, I mean, but if you don't...
Doesn't matter now. Doesn't matter at all.
Oh.
Look at those men digging over there.
Just ploughing a field. Cambridge is not just a university town, you know, there's...
No, they're not ploughing. Look at the sign. We missed it last night.
Although the university itself is splendid, there's the river and...
New Municipal Cemetery.
Here's the station.
They're not ploughing. They're sowing. La, 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 la,
Hold on.
Ringing the Changes, Gerald was George Baker, Phrynne, Fiona Allen, and Mrs. Pascoe, Barbara Shelley. The Commandant was Michael Cochrane, and the Station Master, Mark Gatiss. All other parts were played by members of the cast. Original music was composed by Joby Talbot, and special sound design by O2, with thanks to the bell ringers of Upper Chute. Ringing the Changes by Robert Aickman was dramatised for radio by Jeremy Dyson and Mark Gatiss, and produced in Manchester by Pauline Harris.
It was somewhere at the back of beyond. Maybury would have found it difficult to be more precise. The most that could be said was that Maybury was presumably at the outer edge of the immense West Midlands conurbation. He seemed to have been driving for hours since he left the works, going round and round in large or small circles, asking the way and being unable to understand the answers, all the time seemingly more off course than ever. Maybury looked at his watch. He had been driving for hours. By rights, he should have been more than halfway home, considerably more. Even the dashboard light seemed feebler than usual, but by it, Maybury saw that he would soon be out of petrol. Dark though it was, Maybury was aware of many trees, mountainous and opaque. It was not, however, that there were no houses. Houses there must be, because on both sides of the road there were gates, broad single gates commonly painted white, and even where there were no gates, there were dim entrances. Almost identical roads seemed to curve away in all directions. It was quiet. The houses were set too far back from the road for the noise of the television sets to be heard. Pedestrians are now so rare in such a district at any hour, but now there was no traffic either. Maybury was disturbed by the silence. By the light of the occasional street lamp, Maybury could see that sometimes there was an owner who had his hedge trimmed and sometimes an owner who did not. It would be futile to walk any further along the road. There were Angela and their son Tony awaiting him, and he must resume the fight to rejoin them. Something shot out at him from the left. He had disturbed a cat. The first he knew of it was its claws, or conceivably its teeth, sunk into his left leg. There had been no question of ingratiation or cuddling up. Maybury kicked out furiously. He must have kicked the cat a long way because there was no hint of it, nor had he seen the colour of the cat. He fancied he had seen 2 flaming eyes, but he was not sure even of that. There had been no mew, no scream. Maybury faltered. His leg really hurt. It hurt so much that he could not bring himself to touch the limb, even to look at it in the lamplight. He faltered back at the car, and though his leg made difficulties even starting it, set off indecisively down the road along which he had just walked. The road was beginning to straighten out, though the trees remained dense. There were still occasional houses with entries at long and irregular intervals. Lampposts were becoming fewer also, but Maybury saw that one of them bore a hanging sign of some kind. The sign was shaped like a club in a pack of cards and read, "The Hospice. Good fare, some accommodation." Maybury decided almost instantly he was hungry, he was injured, he was lost, he was almost without petrol. He would inquire for dinner and, if he could telephone home, might even stay the night, though he had neither pyjamas nor electric razor. The gate, made of iron, and more suited, Maybury would have thought, to a farmyard bullpen, was nonetheless wide open. Maybury drove through. Maybury's headlights bounced and lurched disconcertingly as he proceeded, but suddenly the drive, which had run quite straight, swerved, and there, on Maybury's left, was the hospice. Maybury locked the car and pushed at the door of the house. It was a solid Victorian door, and it did not respond to Maybury's pressure. Maybury was discouraged by the need to ring, but he rang. He noticed there was a second bell lower down marked night. Surely it could not yet be night. He did not much care for standing alone in the strange place under bright floodlight, uncertain of what was going to happen. But quite soon the door was opened by a lad with curly fair hair and an untroubled face. He was wearing a white jacket and smiling helpfully. "Dinner?" "Yes, sir. I fear we have just started, but I'm sure we can fit you in." To Maybury the words brought back the seaside boarding houses where he had been taken for holidays when a boy. Inside, it was not at all like the boarding houses of Maybury's youth. Maybury happened to know exactly what it was like. The effect was that produced by the efforts of an expensive and rather old-fashioned furniture emporium. There were hangings on the walls, and every chair and sofa was upholstered. The lad held open the door marked gentleman in script, but then followed Mabry in, which Mabry had not particularly expected, but the lad did not proceed to fuss tiresomely with soap and towel as happens sometimes in very expensive hotels. All he did was stand about. Mabry reflected that doubtless he was concerned to prevent all possible delay, dinner having started. The dining room struck Mabry, immediately he entered, as rather too hot. The room was lined with hangings similar to those in the hall, but apparently even heavier. Possible noise reduction was among the objects. The ceiling of the room had been brought down in the modern manner, and any windows had disappeared behind swathes. It is true that knives and forks make a clatter, but there appeared to be no other immediate necessity for costly noise abatement, as the diners were all extremely quiet, which at first seemed the more unexpected in that most of them were seated fairly closely packed at a long single table running down the central axis of the room. On each side of the room were 4 smaller tables, set endways against the walls, every table set for a single person, even though big enough to accommodate 4, and at one of these Mabry was settled by the handsome lad in the white jacket. Immediately, soup arrived. There was an enormous quantity of soup, in what Mabry realised was an unusually deep and wide plate. Round much of its wide rim was inscribed in large black letters, "The Hospice," rather in the style of a baby's plate. The soup itself was unusually weighty too. It undoubtedly contained eggs, as well as pulses, and steps had been taken to add thickening also. Mabry was faintly disconcerted to realise that one of the middle-aged women was standing quietly behind him as he consumed the not inconsiderable number of final spoonfuls. The woman removed his plate with a reassuring smile. The second course was there. As she set it before him, the woman spoke confidentially in his ear of the third course. "It's turkey tonight." Her tone was exactly that in which promise is conveyed to a little boy of his favourite dish. Meanwhile, the second course was a proliferating elaboration of pasta, probably fabricated that morning. Cheese, in fairly large granules, was strewn across the heap from a large porcelain bowl, without Mabry being noticeably consulted. "Can I have something to drink? A lager will do." "We have nothing like that, sir." "A pity," said Mabry. The woman's inflections were beginning to bore him, and he was wondering how much the rich food, all palpably fresh and homegrown, and of almost unattainable quality, was about to cost him. He doubted very much whether it would be sensible to think of staying the night at the hospice. "When you have finished your second course, you may have the opportunity of a word with Mr. Faulkner." "Can't you eat any more?" she inquired baldly, no longer addressing Mabry as sir. "Not if I'm to attempt another course," replied Mabry quite equably. "It's very good," said Mabry firmly, "but I've had enough." It was as if the woman were not used to such conduct, but as this was no longer a nursery, she took the plate away. His slab of turkey appeared. It was an enormous pile, steaming slightly and also seeping slightly with a colourless, oily fluid. With it appeared 5 separate varieties of vegetables in separate dishes, and a sauceboat, apparently for him alone, of specially compounded fluid, dark red and turgid. A sizable mound of stuffing completed the repast. The middle-aged woman set it all before him swiftly, but this time silently, with unmistakable reserve. The truth was that Mabry had little appetite left. He gazed around to see how the rest were managing. He had to admit that, as far as he could see, they were one and all eating as if their lives depended on it. Old as well as young, female as well as male, it was as if they had spent a long, unfed day in the hunting field. "Is everything to your liking, Mr. Mabry?" again he'd be gently taken by surprise. Mr. Faulkner was at his shoulder, a sleek man in the most beautiful dinner jacket, and instantly ameliorative maitre d'hotel. "Perfect, thank you," said Mabry. "But how did you know my name?" "We like to remember the names of all our guests," said Faulkner, smiling. "Yes, but how did you find out my name in the first place? We like to think we're proficient at that too, Mr. Mabry." "I am much impressed," said Mabry. Really, he felt irritated, but his firm had trained him never to display irritation outside the family circle. Faulkner went quietly forward on his round of the room, speaking to perhaps one person in 3 at the long central table. To some of the people, Faulkner was speaking for quite a period of time, while, as Mabry noticed, those seated next to them, previously saying little in most cases, now said nothing at all, but confined themselves entirely to eating. Some of the people at the long table were not merely elderly, but positively senile, drooling, watery-eyed, and almost hairless, but even they seemed to be eating away with the best. Faulkner was proceeding so slowly, showing so much professional consideration, that he had not yet reached the lady who sat by herself parallel with Mabry on the other side of the room. Black hair reached her shoulders, and she wore what appeared to be a silk evening dress. She must, he was sure, have been beautiful. Indeed, in a way, still was. "Eat up, sir, you've hardly started." His tormentor had quietly returned to him. "I've had enough. I'm sorry, it's very good, but I've had enough." That's not necessarily for each of us to say, is it? "I want no more to eat of any kind. Please take all this away and bring me a black coffee. When the time comes, if you like. I don't mind waiting." The woman did the last thing Mabry could have expected her to do. She picked up his laden plate and, with force, dashed it on the floor. Even then, the plate itself did not break, but gravy and vegetables and rich stuffing spread across the thick patterned wall-to-wall carpet. Complete, in place of comparative silence, followed in the whole room. "Mr. Mabry," Faulkner continued, "I entirely understand your difficulty. There is naturally no obligation to partake of anything you do not wish. I'm only sorry for what has happened. Must seem like very poor service on our part. Perhaps you would prefer to go into our lounge. Would you care simply for some coffee?" "Yes," said Mabry, concentrating upon the essential. "Could I possibly have a pot of it?" He had to step with care over the mess on the floor, looking downwards. As he did so, he saw something most curious. A central rail ran the length of the long table, a few inches above the floor. To this rail, one of the male guests was attached by a fetter round his left ankle. Much to his surprise, it was Mulligan who brought him the coffee. It was a single cup, not a pot. While Mabry was trying to make the most of his meagre coffee, the tragic lady from the other side of the room appeared. She sat not at the other end of the sofa, but at the centre of it. She wore complicated, oriental-looking earrings with pink, translucent stones and silver shoes. Her perfume was heavy and distinctive. "My name is Cecile Silimena," she said. "How do you do? I'm supposed to be related to the composer Chaminade." "How do you do?" said Mabry. "My name is Lucas Mabry, and my only important relation is Solway Short. In fact, he's my cousin." "Who is that gentleman you mentioned?" she asked. "Solway Short, the racing motorist. You must have seen him on the television." "I do not watch the television." "Quite right. It's almost entirely a waste of time." "If you do not wish to waste time, why are you at the hospice?" "I'm here for dinner. I'm just passing through." "Oh, you are going then?" Mabry hesitated. She was attractive, and for the moment he did not wish to go. "I suppose so, when I've paid my bill and found out where I can get some petrol. As a matter of fact, I'm lost. Most of us here are lost." "Why here? What makes you come here?" "We come for the food, and the peace, and the warmth, and the rest." "I'm not sure I quite fit in," said Mabry, and then he added, "I shouldn't have thought that you did either." "Oh, but I do." "Whatever makes you think not?" She seemed quite anxious about it, so that Mabry supposed he'd taken the wrong line. "To start with, more beautiful. You are very beautiful," he said. "That's kind of you to say." Unexpectedly, she stretched out the short distance between them and took his hand. "What did you say your name was?" "Lucas Mabry." "Do people call you Luke?" "No, I dislike it. I'm not a Luke sort of person." "But your wife can't call you Lucas." "I'm afraid she does." It was a fishing question he could have done without. "This is a curious place," said Mabry, giving her hand a squeeze. "I could not live without the hospice," she replied. "Life would be impossible otherwise." She twisted round until her legs were extended the length of the sofa. Her perfume wafted upwards. Then suddenly it seemed that everyone was in the room at once, and this time all talking and fussing. She sat herself up, and with her lips close to his ear said, "Come to me later. Number 23. Faulkner had appeared. "To bed all," he cried genially. No one moved much, but no one spoke either. "To bed all of you," said Faulkner again, this time in a tone which might almost be described as roguish. Maybury was alone with Faulkner. "Before I ask for my bill," said Maybury, "I wonder if you could tell me where I might possibly find some petrol at this hour. There's nothing open at night within 20 miles. All I can suggest is that I siphon some petrol from the tank of our own vehicle." The lad, Vincent, reappeared, still looking pink. "No trouble at all, Mr. Maybury," said Faulkner. "Vincent here can do it easily, or another member of my staff." "Vincent," directed Faulkner, "don't bolt and padlock the front door yet. Mr. Maybury intends to leave us." "Very good," said Vincent gruffly. Where it had been excessively hot within, it duly proved to be excessively cold without. The floodlight had been turned off, the moon had gone in, and all the stars had apparently gone with it. Still, the distance to the car was not great. Maybury soon found it in the thick darkness, with Faulkner coming quietly step by step behind him. Maybury had already turned on the headlights and was pushing at the starter, which seemed obdurate. It was not he thought there was anything wrong with it, but rather there was something wrong with him. The sensation was exactly like a nightmare. "I wish I could be of some help," remarked Faulkner. Maybury was irritated again. He felt as if he was going mad. "Perhaps Cromie could be of assistance," said Faulkner. "Cromie has been with us quite a long time and is a wizard with any mechanical problem." Faulkner stepped out of the car and disappeared into the house, shutting the front door behind him, lest the cold air enter. In the end, the front door reopened, and Faulkner re-emerged. He still wore no coat over his dinner suit, and seemed to ignore the cold. Faulkner was followed by a burly but shapeless and shambling figure. "Cromie will soon put things to rights," said Faulkner, opening the door of the car. "Won't you, Cromie?" It was much as one speaks to a friendly retriever, but there was little, Maybury felt, that was friendly about Cromie. Maybury could not acknowledge that for some degrading reason he was unable to operate the starter, and so had to claim there was something wrong with it. He was unable not to see Cromie's huge, badly misshapen yellow hands as he tugged with both of them at the knob, forcing it in and out with such violence that Maybury cried out, "Less force! You'll wreck it!" "Careful, Cromie," said Faulkner. "Most of Cromie's work is on a big scale," he explained to Maybury. But violence proved effective, as so often. Within seconds, the car engine was humming away. Cromie duly extricated himself and shambled off into the darkness. "Now," said Maybury, brisking up as the engine purred, "where do we go for the petrol?" There was the slightest of pauses. Then Faulkner spoke. "Mr. Maybury, I have remembered something. It's not petrol that we have in our tank. It is, of course, diesel oil. I must apologise for such a stupid mistake." Maybury was not merely irritated, not merely scared. He was infuriated. With rage and confusion, he found it impossible to speak at all. "I am extremely sorry, Mr. Maybury. Would you permit me to make some amends by inviting you to spend the night with us free of charge, except perhaps for the dinner?" "Thank you," he said, less than graciously. "We shall try to make you comfortable," said Faulkner. "I have no luggage of any kind," remarked Maybury, still very much on the defensive. "That may solve itself," said Faulkner, smoothing his dinner jacket. "There's something I ought to explain, but will you first excuse me a moment?" Faulkner returned. "There's something I ought to explain," he said again. "We have no single rooms, partly because many of our visitors prefer not to be alone at night. The best we can do for you in your emergency, Mr. Maybury, is to offer you the share of a room with another guest. It is a large room, and there are 2 beds. Mr. Bannard will be glad of your company, I am certain, and you will be quite safe with him. I've just sent a message up asking if he can possibly come down so that I can introduce you." "I should like to telephone my wife, if I may," Maybury said. Angela had been steadily on his mind for some time. "I fear that's impossible, Mr. Maybury," replied Faulkner. "I'm so sorry. How can it be impossible? Most of our guests are regulars, and the last thing they come for is to hear a telephone ringing the whole time and all the strain it involves." "I'm sorry," said Maybury, "but I simply must telephone my wife. She'll be out of her mind with worry." "I shouldn't think so, Mr. Maybury," said Faulkner, smiling. "Concerned, we must hope, but not quite out of her mind." Maybury could have hit him, but at that moment a stranger entered. "Ah, Mr. Bannard," said Faulkner, and introduced them. You won't mind, Mr. Bannard, if Mr. Mabry shares your room? Bannard was a slender, bony little man. He was bald with a rim of curly red hair. I should be delighted to share my room with anyone, replied Bannard. I'm lonely by myself. Splendid, said Faulkner coolly. Perhaps you'll lead Mr. Mabry upstairs and lend him some pyjamas. You must remember he is a stranger to us and doesn't yet know all our ways. Delighted, exclaimed Bannard. Well then, said Faulkner, is there anything else you would like, Mr. Mabry, before you go upstairs? Only a telephone, rejoined Mabry, still recalcitrant. Anything you would like that we are in a position to provide, Mr. Mabry. There is no telephone here, put in Bannard, whose voice was noticeably high, even squeaky. In that case, nothing, said Mabry. But I don't know what my wife will do with herself. None of us knows that, said Bannard superfluously, and cackled for a second. Mabry was almost surprised to discover, as he followed Bannard upstairs, that it seemed a perfectly normal hotel, though overheated and decorated over heavily. Not too much noise, said Bannard. We have some very light sleepers amongst us. The corridors were down to half illumination, and distinctly sinister. Mabry crept foolishly along, and almost stole into Bannard's room. It was a large square room, and the two beds were in exactly opposite corners, somewhat to Mabry's relief. Night-night, then. Best thing is to get to sleep quickly. His tone was similar to that which seemed habitual with Faulkner. While balancing his trousers on the hanger, Mabry became aware of the injury to his leg. What's the matter? Said Bannard. Hurt yourself, have you? It was a damned cat scratched me, replied Mabry. With some difficulty and some pain, he rolled up the tight pyjama leg. It was quite a nasty gash. There was much dried blood. Don't show it to me, squeaked Bannard. It's bad for me to see things like that. I'm upset by them. Mabry made no reply, but simply rolled down his pyjama leg. Bannard, however, was still sitting up in bed. He was looking pale. I come here to forget things like that, he said. We all do. His voice was shaking. Shall I turn the light out? Inquired Mabry. I don't usually do that, said Bannard. It can make things difficult. But there's you to be considered too. All right, said Bannard. If you wish, turn it out. Tonight, anyway. I'm only here for one night, said Mabry. More to the darkness than to Bannard. You'll be on your own again tomorrow. It was completely dark. It was completely silent. It was far too hot. It was not a promising recipe for slumber. In the end, he thought he could detect Bannard's breathing far, far away. Half a lifetime passed. There could be no doubt now that Bannard was both still in the room and also awake. Perceptibly, he was on the move. Mabry's body contracted with speculation as to whether Bannard, in the total blackness, was making towards his corner. Mabry felt he was only half his normal size. Bannard edged and groped interminably. Mabry could hardly hear him moving at all, though it was a gamble whether this was consideration or menace. Mabry would hardly have been surprised if the next event had been hands on his throat. In fact, the next event was Bannard reaching the door and opening it with vast delicacy and slowness. But Mabry did not feel fully reassured as he rigidly watched the column of dim light from the passage slowly widen and then slowly narrow until it vanished with the faint click of the handle. Then, from somewhere within the house, came a shattering, ear-piercing scream. And then another. And another. It was impossible to tell whether the din came from near or far, still less whether it was female or male. It was shattering to listen to, especially in the enclosed, hot, total darkness. The screaming went on until Mabry had to clutch at himself, not to scream in response. The screaming stopped on a ghoulish gurgle, perhaps as if the sufferer had vomited immensely and then passed out, or in mercy, passed away altogether. Then Bannard was creeping back into the room. Mabry's ears had picked up no faint sound of a step in the passage. There had been no noise either of a turned key. He shut the door with extraordinary skill, and Mabry could just, though only just, hear him slithering into his bed. Still, there was one unmistakable development. At Bannard's return, the dark room had filled with perfume. The perfume favoured by the lady who had been so charming to Mabry in the lounge. Mabry had every reason to be at least irritated by everything that was happening, but instead, he soon fell asleep himself. Then he was awake again, and Bannard was standing there by his bed. Was the man standing there really Bannard? Bannard had a fringe of red hair, whereas this man's fringe was quite grey. There was also a different expression and general look. I was just wondering if you'd care to talk for a bit, said Bannard. What was all that screaming? Inquired Mabry. I didn't hear anything, said Bannard. I suppose I slept through it, but I can imagine. We soon learned to take no notice. He took a step nearer and bent slightly over Mabry's face. His pyjamas really reeked of perfume. Perhaps we could talk for just 5 or 10 minutes more, said Mabry, and then I should like to get to sleep again, if you'll excuse me. I ought to explain that I slept very little last night owing to my wife's illness. Is your wife pretty? Said Bannard. Of course she is, said Mabry. Tell us about it, said Bannard. Tell us exactly what it's like to be a married man. Has it changed your whole life? Not exactly. In any case, I married years ago. Love's old sweet song still sings to you? Time's up for me, said Mabry. Do you mind if we go to sleep again? Bannard rose at once to his feet. Could the absurd conversation with Bannard have been a dream? Certainly what happened next was a dream, for there was Angela in her nightdress with her hands on her poor head, crying out, "Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!" Mabry could not but comply, and in Angela's place there was the boy Vincent, with early morning tea for him. Down in the lounge, there they all were, with Faulkner presiding, undefinably but genially. Universal expectation was detectable. Of breakfast, Mabry assumed. Bannard was simply lost in the throng. Cecile he could not see, but he made a point of not looking very hard. Faulkner crossed to him at once. I can promise you a good breakfast, Mr. Mabry, he said confidentially. Lentils, fresh fish, rump steak, apple pie made by ourselves, with lots and lots of cream. I mustn't stay for it, said Mabry. I simply mustn't. I have my living to earn. I must go at once. He was quite prepared to walk a couple of miles. Indeed, all set for it. A faint shadow passed over Faulkner's face, but he merely said in a low voice, You can respect a confidence? Yes, said Mabry steadily. There was an incident here last night. A death. We do not talk about such things. Our guests do not expect it. I am sorry, said Mabry. Such things still upset me, said Faulkner. Nonetheless, I must not think about that. My immediate task is to dispose of the body, while the guests are preoccupied, to spare them all knowledge, all pain. How's that to be done? Inquired Mabry. In the usual manner, Mr. Mabry. The hearse is drawing up outside. Where you are concerned, the point is this. If you wish for what in other circumstances I could call a lift, I could arrange for you to join the vehicle. It seems the best solution, don't you think, Mr. Mabry? A coffin was already coming down the stairs, borne on the shoulders of 4 men in black, with Vincent in his white jacket coming first. I agree, said Mabry. Perhaps you would let me know of my bill for dinner. I shall waive that too, Mr. Mabry, in the present circumstances. We have a duty to hasten. I shall simply say how glad we have been to have you with us. He held out his hand. Goodbye, Mr. Mabry. Mabry was compelled to travel with the coffin itself, because there was not room for him on the front seat, where a director of the firm, a corpulent man, had to be accommodated with the driver. Mabry alighted unobtrusively when a bus stop was reached. One of the undertaker's men said he should not have to wait long.
Le Miroir by Robert Aickman. Read by Tim McInerney. Celia's father was old enough to be her grandfather, perhaps her great-grandfather. He had beautiful silvery hair and a voice like a distant bell of indeterminate note, but, unfortunately, he could move only very slowly. Celia had never known her mother, and that lady's portrait was always turned to the wall in accordance with her father's adjuration. The old house was crumbling now, and something beautiful was lost to it with every year that ended. Even the drawing of an unknown smiling woman by Raphael, even the tiny box found in the Prince of Moskova's fob and soaked in his blood. In the end, one would have thought that there remained only the mirrors, the looking-glasses, if you insist. All the looking-glasses were, of course, mercury-silvered, so that as well as reflecting, they embellished and discriminated. Day by day, Celia's father would toil round the rooms, struggling up the grand staircases, crawling perilously down them, in every room, on every landing, at every dark corner, gazing in the looking-glasses, outstaring time. Right from the cradle, Celia had vouchsafed her frail, dream-like drawings. She had studied every urn in the park and every ancient tree by every condition of light. It was natural that when Celia had arrived at her 16th birthday, she should wish to go to Paris in order to increase her power and widen her range. Still in a dream, she found herself enrolled at a long-established and old-fashioned private atelier. Etienne's, it had been familiarly named by many generations of students, some of them always British. Celia, aged 16 years and 11 days, was escorted to France by Mr. Burfey, the chief clerk in Totlands, her father's solicitors, and of course her own too. But all the arrangements had really been made by Celia's distant cousin Rolf, who found her a nearby apartment, very high up, but with 2 rooms, though small ones, and with what amounted to a private staircase down to the sanitary facilities on the floor immediately below. It was unexpected that a girl of Celia's age and background should be deposited on her own in Paris, but she had requested it. She had always spoken quantities of French, and she could not see that there was anyone to make a fuss. Fortunately, Celia could depend upon an adequate allowance. This was mainly because her father did not understand the value of money, and throughout his long life had made a point of refusing all advice about it, or about anything else. The first things that Celia bought were additional chattels for her miniature rooms, which she was surprised to find almost unfurnished. In particular, there was not one single mirror or looking-glass, so Celia went out and purchased 5 looking-glasses immediately. All but one would be merely for use each day and were backed with nitrate, but the last of her acquisitions might have stood in any bedroom. Celia had spotted it in one of the low, dark, hopelessly untidy shops where, until recently, one bought such things in Paris. The shop had proved to be run not by the usual very old man, but by an even older woman. The aged tricoteurs had driven a terribly hard bargain, but Celia had to possess the glass, for the obvious reason that she could not live without it. Secondly, because it bore extremely faded traces of mysterious male and female figures. Thirdly, because the face that had just looked back at her from its shallows and depths had not been her own. Celia sat before the beautiful mirror or looking-glass, now in one new dress, now in another, and intermittently without troubling to put on a dress at all. So life continued. Celia could not quite say for how long, as her father wrote letters of any kind only on formal occasions, and Totlands really had no business to transact with her beyond paying out her allowance with their usual precise punctuality. One morning Celia felt quite certain of something that of late she had more and more suspected. She was not merely looking older, but looking much older, more perceptibly skinny. The first bright light of spring must have wrought the trick. At least Celia presumed it was the spring, which she had always distrusted, even artistically. It was the season when doubt was no longer possible. Momentarily she clutched at the neckline of her dress and managed to inflict an actual rent. Even the fabric of her garments seemed to have weakened slightly. This had been an expensive garment once. All the same, life has in some sense to go forward, as long as it beats with us at all, and Celia, despite her tendency to melancholy, was perfectly courageous. Moreover, she was finding more and more of herself in her art, and had been assured that soon she might quite easily win a medal of some kind. Of course, that had been said to her privately, in order not to upset the others. She bought many new dresses to replace the one she had torn, with a view to meeting life from time to time in different and selected disguises. Sometimes she dwelt upon what it would be like to nurture 8 or 9 children, the fruit of her womb, some brusque, shadowy figure to pay for it all and act as head of the household. How long could it have been before Celia, despite her precautions, caught her own eye in the glass and realized that she must be middle-aged? She opened a letter that morning, even though dust had settled on it quite deeply. It was from David Skelt, the senior partner in Totlands. He had never before been under any necessity to write to her personally. Mr. Skelt informed her that her father had become so frail that his nurse would have to be supplemented by at least one other, and that her own allowance would have henceforth to be halved at the least in consequence. Prices in Paris were said to be rising, and the people to be changing in character, but Celia knew that she still had her art as well as her beautiful looking-glass. She realized that her art must mean more to her with every day that sped past. Whether strangers cared for her art or not, the other pupils could be counted upon for loyalty without flaw. The future was an open question yet. It did not take long, by any standard, for the point to be reached where Celia's ever smaller allowance was intersected by the ever larger cost of everything. Sometimes the watchful could see her white hair and white face at the edge of the rotting curtain as she looked out at the march past for social justice. She began cutting away the gangrene from her limbs, or what she assumed to be gangrene. She was too scared to use the sharpest knife she had, as no doubt she should have done. The times had become so harsh and the people so indifferent that the art school, after all those years, was in real danger of shutting. Celia reflected that one's art is strictly one's own, and that never should it mean more to her than it meant now, or shudderingly seldom. Faces she took to belong to Raphael, Luca Giordano, and Frederick Leighton now looked upon her, exaltedly and exhortingly, from within the beautiful looking-glass. When she was not at art school or trying to buy simple things with almost no money, Celia spent most of her time gazing. Only in that way could she be true to herself. But never until now had she seen faces or forms to which she could attach names. Too often of late she had seen shapes for which no name was possible. On occasion they had emerged and had had to be driven back with implements she had found on sale, second-hand at very low prices near Les Halles, and presumably intended for the meat trade in one of its aspects. Celia knew perfectly well that if she was to stand any chance of making a permanent mark, as the faces expected of her, then she should practice much more, as ballerinas have to do. She should be plucky, confident, and indefatigable, like Rosa Bonheur. She should probably look like Rosa Bonheur also, though she had enough difficulty already in hanging on to looks of any kind. "Oh, let me join you," cried Celia, stretching out her arms to the real Celia within the beautiful mirror's mysterious depths. The real Celia stretched voluptuously in a patterned dress on the chaise longue she had bought with such innocent ardour. The coloured figures at the top of the frame had entirely faded long ago. Celia thought that the real Celia slightly moved one pale hand and even opened her eyes a little wider. She could not remember whether the patterned dress was a silk dress for parties or a cotton dress for shopping. In any case, there would be no actual harm done if she continued to supplicate, to beseech. Once, about this time, Celia actually heard from Mr. Burfey. It was the very first letter she had ever received from him. Mr. Burfey said that her father unfortunately needed more trained nurses all the time, and there was almost no money left from which to pay for anything, and that he, Mr. Burfey, was about to retire after generations of service with the firm, and was writing to everyone he knew and could remember for that reason. Celia had all along been required to pay the rent in advance, especially as she was a foreigner, and she became anxious if she did not meet all demands in cash, and with punctuality, to say the least of it, and most of all with the rent. These rigours may have combined to reverse the effect intended, as so often in life, because somehow the payment due from Celia after that last payment she was able to make, and had made more prematurely than ever, came to be overlooked altogether. It is not such an uncommon event in Paris as is generally supposed. Quite unfairly, there was a small scandal when Celia was certified to have been dead for something like 4 or 5 months, before any part of her was actually found by a visitor from the outside world. After various alarums had been raised, the elderly married couple who lived far below Celia and looked after the place as best they could, sent their burly young nephew Armand to beat upon the door. In no time Armand came hurtling all the way down again, nearly doing himself an injury in the feeble light. What he had to say was that he had quite clearly seen Madame lying there in the mirror, but no Madame in the room itself. However, this summary proved possibly erroneous on at least 2 counts. The figure seen in the mirror proved, upon Armand's cross-examination by his adoring aunt and all the community, to be not Madame at all, but Mademoiselle, perhaps, and therefore beside the present point. And Madame was in the room herself, though as to what had happened to her, the pathologist ultimately declined to make a declaration. The press thought it might have been rats, and it was mainly that hypothesis which caused the scandal, such as it was. Le Miroir by Robert Aickman was read by Tim McInerney and produced by Karen Rose. It was a Sweet Talk production for Radio 4 Extra. Raising the Wind by Robert Aickman, read by Tim McInerney. A man I know named Philbrick makes his living by navigating boats from one place to another on behalf of their owners. Philbrick and I were at school together. I went on to Oxford, and since then I am supposed not to have done too badly on Lloyd's. All the same, I often envy Philbrick. His life's his own, he sees a lot of the world. Furthermore, I am sure he does surprisingly well financially. The people who own fair-sized boats nowadays have no time to be aboard them, and always want the boat to be somewhere else than they have to be. That's when Philbrick comes on the scene. I've put quite a few jobs in his way myself, and one job of that kind, punctually carried through, soon leads to others. Of course, it's different if the boat goes to the bottom, as in the case I'm about to tell you. This time, Philbrick had to bring a Thames barge from a small port in East Anglia to a lonely spot on the Thames estuary, where the new owner had acquired a tidal mooring, at which he was proposing to convert the barge with his own hands at weekends. It was a matter of bringing the barge round the coast under sail. She had been laid up for a long time, and there was no question of fitting an engine. The new owner was simply going to use her as a residence, and had no idea of her ever going to sea again. So I dare say I was among the first that Philbrick thought of to lend a hand with the job. One trouble was that the impatient young bridegroom-to-be had put in the letter of agreement, which Philbrick always insisted upon, a precise date of delivery, and there wasn't much time. Nonetheless, it should only have taken a single weekend, and I offered Philbrick the choice of 2 consecutive ones. Of course, there is no question of money passing, at least where I am concerned. I helped Philbrick out as a friend, or just for the hell of it. When the time came, I could manage only the second weekend, and on the Friday night I drove down to the small East Anglian port. I noticed that near Mark's Tay the rooks were making curious patterns in the sky, but I thought little of it. The barge was named Dorothea. Philbrick had been camping out in her for well over a week. Curiously enough, he was miffed by my late arrival and unhelpful with the rations, tired though I was. This was most unlike the man I knew. Fortunately, I had brought a dozen bottles of Scotch, and a bottle or two of Irish as well. Outside it was pitch black and stifling, and very smelly. "Hadn't we better pray for a wind?" I asked. "It's gone on like this all the time I've been here," said Philbrick, pouring down about half a tumbler of whisky. "It's almost too hot to raise a sail," I said. Of course, the big sail on a barge is heavy to handle. "If we don't get going tomorrow, I shall be liable for damages," said Philbrick. "Bloody little Raby baby insisted on it." I did know that the man's name was supposed to be Raby. Not a good omen, I'd thought. Too like rabid. The business of the damages worried me all night. It somehow brought to mind the coffin ships, which used to be sent to sea in order to sink with all below-decks personnel, so that the insurance might be collected fraudulently. Of course, I am in insurance. In any case, I have seldom passed a more objectionable night. In addition to everything else, there were rats and other vermin, and Philbrick appeared to be suffering virtual DTs. His state went far beyond anything I had known of him before. In the morning, it was as bad as ever, a sky like copper, and not a leaf stirring before the zephyr. Philbrick started railing away as soon as I appeared, and I quickly realised that it was not merely the matter of the grotesque liability for damages, but something that was much nearer home. The odd thing was that though I could not quite name it, yet it had undoubtedly affected me too. I have to admit that I began answering Philbrick back, and with interest. Suddenly the two of us stopped. We had both spotted an old woman who stood on the bank watching us, not laughing at us, not frightened of us, as well she might have been, just watching us. She was thin as a poker, had very little hair on her bare head, was dressed in nothing I could name, apart from a little scarf round her neck, which was in bright red. Her eyes were very unpleasant, as the eyes of old people sometimes are. "Do you wish to raise the wind?" she asked. This question came in a thin, upward-straining pipe. "Suppose we do," rejoined Philbrick. "Come with me to the church," said the old woman, still standing narrow and motionless. "It will cost you almost nothing." "All right," I called across to her, upon impulse. "I may as well see what happens," I expounded to Philbrick. "We've nothing else to do anyway, not until there's a breeze." Philbrick stared at me. Then he put his hand on my arm. "Don't be an utter fool, old man," he said. "I'm not suggesting that you bother," I replied, "but I propose to see this through. It can hardly take long." The little church stood entirely alone amid the still meadows. The old woman settled to business at once. She went eagerly before me up the path to the porch and opened the church door. Today, of course, it would have to be kept locked, especially in so remote a place, where thieves would have time without end to strip everything. Then she told me what to do. I was to kneel outside the closed door, while she, having shut the door, was to kneel on the other side of it, within the church. When she blew through the big keyhole, I was to blow back. And so on, alternately, rhythmically, steadily. I had feared that the breath of the old woman might be fairly unpleasant, but the curious thing was that it came at me through the keyhole as sweetly as the breath of a young cherub. She blew, and I blew. We continued in turns until, just as the ache in my knees was becoming beyond bearing, I became aware first of noises in the church. Then in no time at all there was a very steady noise indeed. The tumult was such that I couldn't even think properly. I wondered what had happened to the old woman in the middle of it. Up to a point she was, after all, my responsibility. I struggled to my feet and tried to open the church door. I needn't have worried. The door was locked. At first I thought that the devil himself had probably locked it, but it then struck me as more likely that my aged friend had merely turned the key. It is quite common for the church key to be kept on the inside of the door during the day. I subsided onto one of the stone benches and began to rub my knees more systematically while trying to decide what to do next. But after 2 or 3 minutes the door opened and the old woman's bald head was stuck out round the edge of it, like Mr. Punch's head round the corner of the booth. "I forgot the bottle," she squealed. "Have you an empty bottle?" "I've got several," I said. "Bring the biggest." She drew her head in and stuck her very long hand out instead. I tottered off as best I could. When I returned to the porch, I passed the bottle to the long hand, which still protruded. The hand snatched it, and the door shut on the instant. The uproar was just the same, or perhaps worse, and I could imagine that speed could well be of the essence. From that moment, the noise steadily abated. In 2 or 3 minutes, if that, all was timeless peace again. The old woman took her time before making her reappearance. Then she hustled out with my bottle in her hand. "I had to keep you waiting while I sealed it," she explained solemnly, and held out the top of the bottle for me to see. It appeared to me to have been sealed with some liturgical preparation. I looked in through the open door. The entire church was in the most utter chaos. Everything upset, and a terrible amount torn and broken. It was a shocking sight. And there was also the most peculiar and offensive odour. "What's in that bottle?" I asked. "What do you think?" she responded. She slammed the church door shut and we returned to the barge. Much to my surprise, Philbrick had pulled himself together somewhat and was sitting on the deck in a clean shirt, surrounded by Pepsi-Cola cans. "Tuppence halfpenny," squeaked the old dear, holding out the bottle but not letting go of it. "Alas, there's no such sum any longer," I said, and gave her a £1 note. She released the bottle as if the neck of it had been red hot, whereupon I quickly found that red hot was exactly what the neck of the bottle was. The old girl shoved my £1 down her front like the heroine in a 19th century play. I twisted my handkerchief round the neck of the bottle and stepped aboard. I held the bottle up to the light. I could see nothing whatever in it. Certainly there was no liquid in it. "Here," I called after the old woman. "What exactly do we do with it?" "Push yourselves off first, and then open it," she piped back. "Bon voyage." Yes, she actually said those words as she stumbled away up the slope. Curiously enough, Philbrick attempted nothing in the way of argument. He helped me to get the sail up, ridiculous though it seemed in that dead-still air. No doubt it was anything at all to avoid paying those damages. We stood for a moment looking at the dirty big brown sail, as if the two of us were in a dream. Then I knocked off the neck of the bottle with a spike. The barge shuddered all over in a way I had never before experienced with any craft. Then we were out in the centre of the creek and moving steadily towards the open sea. The following breeze was as soft and scented as May Day. Philbrick sprang to take the wheel, and in less than no time we were bowling southward on the almost flat ocean. Naturally, we were looking at one another in a wild surmise, as the poet puts it, but I have never in all my life known a sweeter sail, or, I suppose, a swifter. By that same evening we had reached the big estuary, and through the glasses could make out Southend Pier. Philbrick had resumed his heavy drinking some time before, and unfortunately was missing some of the best atmospheric effects as the sun began to sink. I cannot pretend that I didn't see Philbrick's point, though on me the effect of it all was the opposite. I felt that I should never touch liquor of any kind again. But it seemed not to matter much whether the man at the wheel was drunk or sober. The whole experience could not have come to an end more suddenly or dramatically. As we were standing off the spot where the man Raby hoped to set about his work of happiness, there was a single pulverizing crash, exactly as if it had still been wartime, and both Philbrick and I found ourselves spinning through the air. There was also a single, extremely bright and multicoloured flash, which quite filled the universe, as by now it was almost dark. And there was an utter reek of suffocating sulphur. Philbrick and I fell into the much-contaminated Thames. We swam to the bank fairly easily. Philbrick, I remembered at that point, had been in the School 8 for one term. Unfortunately, the Dorothea was in pieces and completely beyond salvaging. That was one Thames barge the less. So far, the lawyers I recommended to Philbrick have been successful in saving him from the damages. In any case, the damages were in the event of late delivery. And we were not late. Raising the Wind by Robert Aickman was read by Tim McInerney and produced by Karen Rose. It was a Sweet Talk production for Radio 4 Extra. The Fully Conducted Tour by Robert Aickman, read by Tim McInerney. Since I've written quite a number of stories about strange occurrences, and what's more, some of them been published, it's natural that people are always asking how many things of the kind have actually happened to me. They often ask with a nasty gleam in the eye, but that's quite wrong, because strange things happen all the time to many of us, if once we can get our minds off our own little concerns. One point is that the strangeness usually takes an unexpected form. I'll tell you a short tale which may help to illustrate. It's one of a quite large number that have come into my life. It happened 20 years or so ago, and it happened in a part of Italy which I have not visited since, so you must forgive me for not remembering all the names. It was when my first wife was still alive, though unfortunately she was already far from well. In fact, it was for that very reason that we went to Italy, and we managed to stay there for as long as 4 or 5 weeks. Not that it did my poor wife much good. We were staying in a small hotel, or pensione, in a famous city of Tuscany. Of course, I do very well remember which city, but I think it would be best not to name it, and in the end you may see why. Though my wife at that time tired quite easily, and was sometimes, I fear, in a certain amount of pain, we managed to visit a surprising variety of the innumerable historical and artistic sites that surrounded us on all sides. She was seeking distraction, an odd expression, I've always thought, but I must admit that I was glad of it too. Life can be quite unbearable when one of you is not perfectly fit. On a certain morning, after weeks of this, my wife said that she would prefer not to go out, but would just like to spend the day reading quietly. As many of you will suppose, it was Jane Austen she was particularly fond of. She carried around the set of little books wherever she went, a nice set, bound in old-fashioned limp leather with gilt-topped pages, and she just read them over and over again. The only trouble might have been the noise of the very heavy industrial traffic that pounded past that particular pensione night and day. But my wife said she would have to make do, and suggested that I visited somewhere or other on my own, as far away as I liked, because she would be perfectly all right for that one day by herself. The advertised attractions included a list of villas and castelli in the surrounding countryside, which was still in private occupation, and which welcomed tourists to see over the place on occasional specified days. The list was a long one, and the departure times varied, presumably according to the different distances to be covered. All the tours, it was stated, were fully conducted, which always makes the heart sink. But I had thought that probably one ought to try one of these excursions once, so when I had tucked up my wife in bed with a copy of Emma, I ambled round to the place where one applied for tickets. Of course, Americans and Australians and Scandinavians and Germans were trying to book for all kinds of different things, so there were queues and long delays, and when I reached the counter, the man was not at all welcoming. Already irritated past bearing, I assumed. "You want to go today?" he asked suspiciously. "Yes, please. Today. Is there any difficulty?" Despite the pushing crowd, he went to considerable lengths, in not very good English, to explain why some of the places visited on other days were much more attractive to foreign travellers. "Today is the only day I've got," I said. He made further objections. "There's no luncheon." I have forgotten to mention that most of the visits were supposed to include a meal. "Why is that?" I asked. "No food." He stared at me very hard for a moment, but could obviously think of nothing more to say, at least in English, and then very slowly wrote out several of the complicated pieces of paper that go with such outings. Of course, I did not really mind very much about missing luncheon, especially as it seemed to have led to a big reduction in the price, but I had to fill the morning somehow, and whatever happened, I couldn't go back to the pensione. I was quite surprised by how much time I managed to while away just sitting outside a cafe and watching the different women and girls pass by, all walking so differently from the way they walk in England. Then I went to look at the classical statuary in a nearby gallery, which I had almost entirely to myself, though the attendants, one in each room, kept coming up to me and saying, "Venus," or "Juno." There was nothing particularly notable about the party on the coach. It was the usual tired elderly group, struggling a little belatedly with a new world, and not venturing much on comment, except upon such topics as the currency. I spoke to none of them. Of course there were no natives of the country, though a middle-aged Italian woman acted as courier, aided by a very efficient public address system. She looked tired too, but was quite elegantly dressed, and carried herself as gracefully as the rest of her compatriots. She talked about the cascades, the beautiful views on both sides of the coach, and the histories of the different families since Roman times, especially, of course, of the family we were about to visit. She said everything in American English, and some of the things in French and German also. She was difficult to follow, but remarkably sincere. After about 2 hours we reached our destination, and the coach drew up in the courtyard of a vast habitation. Much of the villa was in the Gothic style and extremely difficult to date. One would have said that very little of it could nowadays be inhabited, but appearances can be misleading, especially among the patricians of Italy. There was an enormous portico, and beneath it stood a lady whom one could not doubt for a moment was the chatelaine of the establishment. She was just about the most lovely woman I had at that time ever seen, and she was quite perfectly dressed, in what one knows to be a most expensive way. Furthermore, the lady spoke English much better than the ordinary English person. The sights within were as forlorn-looking as one could have expected. Indeed, strictly speaking, there was nothing to see at all, either from the ordinary guidebook point of view, or still less from that of the connoisseur. I am not a connoisseur, but it was not difficult to see that much. The apartments were enormous, but almost everything was flaky and discoloured, and it occurred to me from place to place that the floorboards might well be actually unsafe. Most of the contents had been dispersed, but at least the lady did not claim that what remained was more important than it was. I was edging along at the rear, as one does when one has to be conducted, but every now and again I was aware of catching the beautiful lady's eye. I truly had not been seeking to do so, and I found it difficult to judge, as one sometimes does, whether it was my eye that was being caught. But in the end, I could be in almost no doubt of it. What happened was this, and it was something that I shall never in my life quite forget, simple though it seemed at the time. We had reached a particularly long hall, or sala, at the far end of which was a pair of double doors, huge as usual, but in much better condition than anything that we had seen hitherto. The doors were brightly painted, both with pictured panels and with multicoloured geometrical embellishments. Surprisingly enough, the lady, who up to that point had been making a reasonable best of everything on view, said nothing at all about these fine doors, but merely announced, "Beyond this are the private apartments, and I ask you all to remove your shoes." Then she smiled a little and added, "or other footwear." She continued, "Those who would prefer not to do so may sit on the seats and wait here." There were some narrow wooden benches lined up irregularly in front of the big doors, but I could see no one, seated or otherwise, who was not removing his or her shoes or boots. However, as far as I was concerned, something had happened. I was reasonably sure that the lady had spoken to me, though only with her eyes, and, I fancied, to me alone. One used to come upon the term speaking eyes. The lady of that house had speaking eyes, and what she said to me with them was, "Come no further." I was as sure of it as I could be. And very curiously, at almost that same moment, I felt really peculiar. It was that kind of nausea where one knows that if one moves at all, one will almost certainly be sick on the instant. It had come upon me very suddenly, but it was all too real. I was sure that I looked chalky, if not green. I could hardly see. Everyone else was shoeless and fully mustered. The lady allowed them to precede her into the private apartments, which had not happened earlier on the tour. I alone remained pallid and virtually paralysed on one of the wickedly comfortless benches. I consider that the lady's eyes spoke to me at this point a second time, saying, "Thank you." I was still alert enough to get the message. Then the big doors closed behind them all. It was some considerable time before I realised that my sickness was that of fear, which no one else had seemed in any way to feel. Possibly some of them had long ago trained themselves to ignore such things. In purely physical terms, if one may put it so, I began at that point to feel, if not better, then at least a little different. Nonetheless, I sat on, contemplating the array of boots and shoes, mainly, I imagine, because I was still unable to move about with much confidence. I continued to sit, and nothing more of any kind happened. Nothing at all. In the end, I realised that I had sat there alone in front of the doors and the scattered footwear for more than 3 hours. Dusk was beginning to fall, and of course it falls more swiftly in Italy than in England. You may perhaps have gathered that I am not very strong in willpower, but I drew heavily upon what I had of it and made my escape. At least I knew and remembered the way back and out of the place, and all of the doors were still open, including the outer one. I saw no one in the house, and I think it quite likely there was no one. I stumbled across the courtyard, out through the gateway and away down the descending track. There was no sign of the coach. I walked steadily for more than an hour and still saw no one. Moreover, it had become completely dark in no time. In the end, I was extravagantly fortunate because I saw from afar a lighted bus and somehow managed to catch it. I did not really know where I was at all, and could easily have had to spend the night in the open. Far worse possibilities were also plainly on the cards. As it was, the bus took me right into the city where we were staying. My poor wife was very nearly in hysterics when I greeted her. Indeed, for a moment, she had actually taken me for a ghost. The next morning, I revisited the tourist office to inquire and expostulate. I thought it best to speak to the same man, even though it involved me in a particularly lengthy queue. All he had to say was, or at least this is the effect of it, "I advised you to go elsewhere. From the Villa A, they never come back." With a large group of eager, middle-aged Canadians immediately behind me, I could think of no way to pursue the matter. The fully conducted tour by Robert Aickman was read by Tim McInerney and was produced by Karen Rose. It was a Sweet Talk production for Radio 4 Extra. The Coffin House by Robert Aickman. Read by Tim McInerney. During the 30s, Jessica Yarrow had found a publisher for no fewer than 4 volumes of verses, and the pleasant little parties in her studio had led to her being regarded with affection by many of the more subdued bohemians. But now, it being 1941, she had been in the Women's Land Army for nearly a year, and she seemed to have only a single friend in the world, her resigned fellow-sufferer, Bunty Baines, daughter of a veterinary surgeon in Shropshire, and one to whom animals and the land seemed truly the order of nature. Mr. Honister, the farmer, a widower and a Methodist, worked both of them as strenuously and as systematically as he could. At Christmas, even Bunty had revolted at the sombre elderly festivities, to which, moreover, they had barely been invited, and the 2 women found themselves on a long, lonely walk together across the bulrush green fells. Their land girl's costume stood them in good stead against the heavy ranging gusts which blew from horizon to horizon every other minute, but they had been able neither to bring much food nor to find shelter in which to eat with comfort the little they had. They had eaten as they walked, but they had started early in the hope of avoiding arguments, and once more were hungry when, shortly after 3:30, the heavy wind fulfilled its threat of heavy rain. Jessica had never seen such rain. "We must get out of this." "Where?" "Look." Jessica pointed to a small wooden cabin which stood alone and exposed on the hillside. The 2 women ran towards it, down and up the intervening fold in the hills. The windows were boarded up, but there were the remains of a primitive veranda. The 2 women pressed themselves against the black, dilapidated woodwork while the rain beat at them. It was darkening all the time with the premature seeming darkness of Christmas Day. Suddenly Jessica noticed that the door of the hut was open. Standing in it was a very large elderly woman with grey hair drawn back into a bun and strong, bony features. She was muffled in a vague navy blue wrapper and appeared indifferent, perhaps habituated to the weather. She was looking at the 2 land girls from grey, commanding eyes. "I should come in if I were you." She spoke in the accents of the district, but with much self-possession. They entered. The cabin, small though it was, appeared to be divided into at least 3 compartments by partitions of dark wood. The outer door led into a centre section, from which other doors opened on either side. The windows being boarded up, the tiny chamber was lighted, it was to be presumed at all times, by a single oil lamp hanging from the roof. The lamp was cheap, crude, and old, its chimney grimed, its illumination wavering. "I should take off your coats and sit down." Although the room seemed unheated, they removed their heavy waterproofs. The only place to sit was on planks, unusually dark and roughly hewn, which stretched between trestles on the far side of the room. Jessica expected the planks to bow when they sat on them, but in fact they remained as firm as the trunk from which they had been cut. Jessica now perceived that the table which filled the rest of the room was a carpenter's bench. It was deep in dust. "I should have some tea." "We couldn't possibly trouble you on Christmas Day," said Jessica, but Bunty's knee struck her sharply, and in any case the elderly woman had disappeared through the door on the right. "I'm dead," said Bunty. She looked around. "Do you think she lives here permanently?" Jessica, faithful to the habits of a lifetime, was combing her wet hair. She found it impossible to see in her little mirror. She said nothing but, "God knows." "I wonder if she's good for an egg," continued Bunty. "I could use an egg." "No hens," said Jessica, trying to smarten her tie. In a moment the elderly woman was laying tea on the dusty carpenter's bench. The cheap white china was chipped and cracked, the teapot spout jagged as a broken tooth. The genteel penny bazaar knives were serrated and rusty. "I should start." Jessica lifted the pot to pour. Immediately she realized that it was empty. Plainly also, there was no food of any kind. Even the sugar basin contained only a discoloured slime. The elderly woman was silently watching them from her grey, commanding eyes. Jessica perceived that the woman could prevent them from walking round the heavy carpenter's bench and reaching the door. For a moment she thought. Then she put down the teapot. "I'm so sorry. My friend and I both take milk." The elderly woman nodded and retired. "Come away," said Jessica more softly than a mouse. "Bring your mackintosh." But Bunty was tightening her belt, and this delayed them, so that before she could reach the door the woman was back. Bunty screamed sharply. The woman had discarded her navy blue wrapper and was dressed in the uniform of an old-fashioned policewoman, with tunic and long skirt. Jessica associated the costume with the previous war. "I shouldn't try any funny business." She had her back to the door. In the heavy clothes she looked more massive than ever. Her voice was sharply menacing. "When my father passed away, his job became mine. I'm the only village policewoman in England. You didn't know that, did you?" Jessica could only shake her head, but she was trying to think. She noticed that Bunty was very pale and seemed as if under a spell. "Mr. Honeyman!" At the elderly woman's call, the remaining door in the room opened for the first time and disclosed a small, bent figure in working clothes. Occasional long grey locks hung from under his black cloth cap, and his trousers were strapped beneath the knees. His face was old and yellow, but he was smiling like Mr. Punch. His hands were shiny with beeswax. He nodded affably to each of the land girls in turn, then beckoned. "I should have a look," advised the elderly woman. Neither of the girls moved. "I don't want to have to use the derbies." Jessica saw that she held 2 pairs of heavy handcuffs. The old man beckoned again. "Easy does it," he said in a voice like a small, cracked bell. They went in. The inner room was lighted by 4 tallow candles, the bases of which had been liquefied and stuck on the floor. Placed so that there was a candle on each side of them were 2 open coffins. They seemed made of the same dark wood as the rest of the place, and they were deeply and newly padded with glossy blood-red satin. Set upright behind them stood their tops, each with a polished and engraved silver plate, which reflected rectangles of light from the candles onto the wooden walls of the room. The elderly woman was again in the doorway behind the 2 land girls. "Do you know what this is?" Mr. Honeyman was holding out a very long, very thin knife, which conjured the reflections on the walls to harlequin activity. "This is a coffin-maker's knife. There's only one place I know where you can get them." "Shall I prepare them, Mr. Honeyman?" inquired the elderly woman. "I'm quite agreeable, Hagan," said Mr. Honeyman. "After all, only work on Christmas Day." It was beginning to thunder. "Look at this," cried Mr. Honeyman in his cracked, triumphant voice. He had laid down the knife and was bringing up a wheeled object from the dusky corner of the little room. It was heavily, though tastelessly, carved in the same dark wood.
You don't see a thing like that every day.
He was standing behind the cabinet, so that only his head and yellow face appeared above it.
It's full of live silkworms. They're necessary in my business.
As he spoke, he was unrolling a bale of soft white silk. The two land girls were clinging together.
I should take off your ties,
suggested the elderly woman. Jessica saw that she had put down the handcuffs and held in one hand a piece of thin red string, such as chemists use for small parcels. Still as if spellbound, Bunty began to comply. She took off her tie and unbuttoned her shirt to the waist. Suddenly Jessica's hands, rough from the fields, were round the old man's throat. In a moment the long, thin knife was hers. Instantly the elderly woman was blowing her police whistle. She blew rendingly, mercilessly, until it seemed that the elements outside the tiny dark cabin picked up the alarum. There was a screaming, cleaving crash and a bright white light. The storm had struck the exposed hut. Or perhaps it had not been thunder, but guns. Jessica awoke in what she took to be a hospital. Certainly there was a nurse standing by her bed. "Where's Bunty?" "I should rest if I were you." Jessica was not in pain, but on the contrary felt wholly and completely numb. Outside they were faintly singing Auld Lang Syne. Perhaps it was New Year's Eve. "Where have I got to?" "You'll soon learn." The woman, Jessica reflected drowsily, must be not a nurse but a sister, as she was middle-aged and wore a dark blue dress buttoned to the chin. She held a hypodermic syringe, larger than Jessica had ever seen. But it appeared to be empty. The Coffin House by Robert Aickman was read by Tim McInerney and produced by Karen Rose. It was a Sweet Talk production for Radio 4 Extra. Just a Song at Twilight by Robert Aickman. Read by Tim McInerney. Up the mud road, neither old nor new, but timeless and sad as the people who built it, advanced the much-battered station wagon. It was also different from last time. It had been less than 4 months before that Lydia and Timo, weary of London, had gone to spend a fortnight on the island with Nugent and Packer, who ran a guest house there. On the island, Lydia had, that spring, caught a glimpse of beauty itself, and agreeable mystery. She could not define these things. She felt it unwise to try. And, most remarkable, Timo seemed to feel them too. For the first time, they really seemed to feel alike. 3 days before they flew away, they decided not only to come back, but to move to the island and live there. The next morning they spent driving round in a hired car, and within a few hours had found a large stone-walled patch of unkempt holding at the top of a deep cleft in the cliffs, with a small modern structure built of slabs lying empty in one upper corner of it. The site seemed perfect. Only 12 kilometres from the town, with no other building in view, and what amounted to a private sandy beach. Admittedly, the house was less attractive. Still, they had sat on the warm grass, feeling the hot rock beneath. But Timo was already worrying, not about the immediate decision, but about his general economic ineffectiveness. It was a distress that always annoyed Lydia, because in this matter at least she had known exactly what lay before her when she married. "Oh, Timo, why can't we just try to be happy?" she said. "I might get a part-time job teaching English," said Timo. "It's a pity that no one needs Estonian." "You can teach me Estonian." Timo smiled and squeezed her hand, but said nothing. She had long before come to suppose that his native land was a secret from which she was thoroughly excluded. "You'll be able to write your book." "My dear Lydia, we haven't bought the place yet. We don't even know if it's for sale." But that same afternoon they were told by a local businessman that it was. He owned it himself. The price was higher than expected, and the businessman wanted immediate payment. In the end, Lydia undertook to transfer a large sum within a week from London to the local bank of San Gabriel. Timo signed 6 or 7 half-comprehended sheets of paper. The property was apparently theirs, and they went into the beautiful square for drinks. When, the following week, all their London friends said they must be quite mad, they lightly out-argued them. But now, in their own station wagon, weighed down with books, art objects, pans, suitcases and camping equipment, the 12 kilometres from the town seemed far longer than they had remembered. Timo set out on a journey round the small estate. "There's a well," he reported. "Is there water in it?" "That will take time to find out." "Isn't it the first thing?" "The first thing tomorrow, perhaps. Now we just unload and go back to Nugent and pack up." It had been the agreed arrangement, but Lydia had never really approved of it. "Couldn't we stay here now that we've got here? There's food and bedding in the van, and all we've got to do is to get up some water." "We're committed. We told Nugent and Packer we were coming back." "They'll hardly notice whether we're there or not." "You wouldn't speak like that if Nugent and Packer were your friends." "In this heat it's absurd to grind along for any more miles in that closed van unless we have to. I'm going to try the well." Lydia ploughed and sweltered across the grass. When she reached the well in the middle of the empty grassland, she shouted back, "What's all this wire?" Across the grass beyond, impeding the access to the private beach, was an entangled swathe of military barbed wire. It came from over the hillside to the left, crossed their little valley, and ascended the hillside to the right, where it passed from view. Lydia looked back and saw that Timo had opened the van. He was taking things out, stacking them against the low wall. She waded across to him. "I've changed my mind," she said. "Let's go back to Nugent and Packer after all. With the things. We've been swindled." "You can't call it swindled. We don't own the land on the other side of the wall." "But they could have told us. Surely they must have known." "Of course they knew. That's how we got the place at all. That's why we were asked to pay at once." "I don't think we should accept the property at all. It was sold to us on false pretenses." "We've paid for it. Or, rather, you have. Do you feel like trying your luck in the local courts?" "I won't just let the money go. If you won't help to get it back, I shall do it myself." "In the meantime," said Timo, "we are bound to live here. It will be months before we can settle anything." Lydia began to take things into the house. After 2 journeys she was so hot that she had to stop. In the end they managed it between them, and the disposition within of the simple objects, the camp beds and the cultural mementos, became almost diverting. Moreover, there was water in the well. They threw down rugs to flatten the long grass, and Lydia began to boil water for tea on their primus stove. "We'd better boil it thoroughly," she observed. "I think it's all right. It looks to me like a spring." "I'm glad something's gone right." They sat gazing at the barbed wire beyond the far wall, awaiting the primus. "If you'd like to stop here tonight," said Timo, "I don't really mind." 10 minutes slipped by. Then there was an interruption. "That's a car," said Timo. "It stopped here," said Lydia. There was a sound of pushing through the grass, and the unexpected figure of a woman came round the corner of the house. She wore a very inappropriate black woolen dress, neglected flat-heeled shoes, and no stockings. She seemed to be about 30. "Can you lend me some money?" 10 crusados will do. I have to pay for the car, please. Timo immediately put his hand in his pocket and produced 14 crusados, all he had, which he gave her. She disappeared. Then the woman was back. I gave him the rest as a tip. I hope you don't mind. They don't like coming all this way, and I have to keep him in order to go back. Lydia had completed the infusion. Would you like a cup of tea? No, nothing, thank you. Lydia filled 2 cups. Do you live on the island? Down in the town. I'm in an impossible situation. I want you to help me. You're the only people who can. Timo was stirring his tea. What do we have to do? He asked. He was not looking at her. My husband bought a house here. He sent me to live here, and without my 2 sisters. We don't get on very well together, and he's got his business, but he swore he'd let my sisters come. How long ago was that? More than 6 months. I've never heard a word more. And now you've run out of money? Yes, but that's not the worst thing. It's the house. It's haunted. Before you tell us about it, are you sure you wouldn't like a cup of tea? She shook her head. You don't know what it means. No one can know. Timo put down his empty cup. No, I don't know, he said. Tell us. She twisted back again and faced them. I can't tell you, but it's true. You'll just have to believe me. I don't suppose the details are any of our business, said Timo. Where does the money come in? I must get away, and I have nothing left. How much? Asked Timo. 200 English pounds. I shall send it back immediately I arrive, of course. I am very sorry, interrupted Lydia, but it is more money than we can afford. In fact, it's more than we've actually got to dispose of, I mean. We're not rich, and we have troubles of our own, as my husband said. She noticed that Timo had looked away and was staring out to sea, disregarding both her and their visitor. I must have it, said the visitor. I'm sorry, a much smaller sum perhaps, if you're really in trouble, but I must say I cannot quite understand what the trouble is. She finds her house is haunted, said Timo, still staring at the sea. It might happen to anyone. It might happen to us. I'm very sorry, Lydia persisted. We simply cannot spare a sum like that. You refuse to help me. We are unable. Lydia noticed that on Timo's face was an expression she had never seen there before. I hear singing, said Timo. The visitor moved not a muscle. Lydia listened. I hear only insects. Neither of the other 2 spoke or moved. Lydia flushed. Do you mind going now? If you really need it, we can let you have a little money, another 20 crusados perhaps, and you needn't worry about repaying it. Have you thought of writing to your husband, or even sending a telegram? Stop talking, said Timo, very softly. Can't you hear music? No, said Lydia. She tried to listen harder. Do you know what it is? Timo inquired of the stranger. She nodded. Tell me. They say that few can hear it. Can you hear it? She nodded again. It's part of the reason why I must get away. It's beautiful all the same, said Timo. It begins by being beautiful, and it ends. They say it never ends. I can hear nothing, said Lydia, and I don't believe that either of you can either. She spoke quite pleasantly, considering how frightened she was. I must explain, said Timo to the visitor, that my wife has all the money. I have none. I am not really even English. The visitor rose to her feet in the sea-green dusk. She was looking upwards at the green sky. Timo had risen with her. If you're going, I mean back to England, said Lydia suddenly, I'll lend you the money. As it happens, I have enough here. We have only just arrived and hoped to be buying things. She opened her handbag and gave up all the paper money in it. I should not ask for it if I did not need it so badly, said the visitor. Lydia looked away from her. You mustn't keep your car waiting any longer. Where are you going? Asked Timo. To the house my husband bought for one further night. What do they call it? They call it the House of the Promised. I don't know why. And then you are going altogether? Back home to my sisters.
Don't forget your shoes, said Lydia.
No, the stranger replied, quietly putting them on. That was generous of you, said Timo in a constrained voice, and imaginative.
It was weak and foolish of me. Lydia was gathering up the rugs and vessels. As always.
I haven't heard her car yet. I haven't heard a sound. There was a long silence.
If you feel like that, you'd better have a look.
He disappeared round the corner of the house. She stood facing the last of the sunset. There was still nothing to be heard. It was as if Timo had stepped into a bottomless pit. Then she heard the engine of their station wagon. She laid down the rugs and crocks and walked slowly in Timo's steps. The last of the green light showed her Timo driving away very fast, alone, it appeared, though it was hard to see. The din seemed to take minutes to die away among the echoing rocks and merge into sounds she had never before consciously listened to, sounds of the alien dusk, unidentifiable, multitudinous, lyrical. Then the night was on her, like the curtain at the end of a play. Just a Song at Twilight by Robert Aickman was read by Tim McInerney and produced by Karen Rose. It was a Sweet Talk production for Radio 4 Extra.